pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin with public audience. Yeah, Mark.
Name is Mark Ornstein, and I live at 82 Old Meadow Plain Road. Last night I watched the Monday evening talk presentation, and I want to try to clarify a little bit where SCTV gets its income from, and then maybe talk a little bit further about what actions are taking place. So SCTV, once a quarter, receives some money from both Comcast, Xfinity, and Frontier. What it receives is 72 cents per cable T provider, subscriber, per month. So it's somewhere in the $8.50 range or so that it receives per subscriber for a year. That's not a payment from Frontier. That appears on your bill. It appears on the Comcast bill as a franchise fee. I have no idea about Frontier, what it appears at. But that's something that's mandated by Pura, I don't know how it's pronounced, Public Utilities. And it periodically, I believe, gets adjusted. It's considered part of the 5% gross revenue fee that I think Xfinity and Frontier have to pay the state each year. Okay. So that's a major part of our income right now. There's a couple of things happening in that area. One is there's a Pura docket right now that is looking at extending the fee to all Xfinity subscribers, whether they're just using internet or whether they're using it to make it broader. Same thing on Frontier. And I'll leave a docket number for you to take a look at. It'd be great, frankly, if you endorse it, to send a letter off to Pura. There's also in the Energy and Technology Subcommittee in the legislature, there's also a bill to do pretty much the same thing. Now, we heard from Senator Whitcoast last night that this stuff is probably not going to happen, at least this session, that only budgetary items are probably going to get covered there. Okay. So, in any event, there's some potential changes going on that may broaden the base, and if the amount per subscriber stays the same, would increase the revenue a little bit on that, try to make up for it. There's another thing that's going on in Washington. And the FCC came out with a 3-2 vote last August that basically said that cable providers could recover in-kind fees. They could recover some of that franchise fee that we get fully right now for things like providing our connectivity, all these things. So that has the potential for totally wiping out roughly $55,000 that we get from Comcast and about $6,000 from Frontier every year. There's been a motion to stay that, so it hasn't gone into effect. Who knows what the ruling is going to be on it, but that piece would be disastrous. Other things can be recovered from on it. So, in a sense, taxpayers of Simsbury are paying. They're not paying through the mill rate, but they're paying through a franchise fee, at least those that are subscribed to either Xfinity or to Frontier in this community. Beyond that, just talking about SCTV in general, there are 2 full-time employees at SCTV now. You've got Karen Hanfield, manager. She does all of the management things that need to be done, including scheduling all 3 channels every week with programming, interfacing with people that want to come in and do programs, scheduling camera people. Camera people work pretty good for these meetings because there's normally one assigned that's picked up as a civic responsibility. You've heard from order their desire to do it. There's some others that do sports only that are very happy to come in, get the field cameras, bring them out, come back. My goal as the techie person for the last few years is to try to get things as simple as possible for the volunteers. It's pretty obvious here, it's pretty obvious in the library now with the permanently mounted cameras that the volunteers don't have to do a heck of a lot. Hopefully next year with the PEG Fisher grant, we'll be able to do even more in this room and more upstairs in the Board of Ed office in terms of setup and breakdown. When you talk about sports, when you talk about sports, there's a little bit more difficulty. That's when the editor has to be involved. And when you talk about doing productions in the building, in the studio, with Dominique or somebody coming in, a group coming in, that is a lot more difficult. There's a lot more editing involved in doing that. And that's just the way it is. Will SCTV ever die? Who the heck knows? But there's certainly things that everybody favors. There's some seniors that favor the exercise and yoga stuff. There's sports freaks. There's government freaks. So just be aware.
Thanks for that additional context, Mark. Appreciate it. John?
Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. I am concerned that the Board of Selectmen has not considered the long-term implications of hiring more staff without any background other than the presentation from chief and heads of departments for their input. The legacy costs associated with each employee that is added to staff increases the budget long-term. Many of the service improvement priorities are redundant expenditures that are not the core services of government. The users who benefit from the improvements should pay for the improvements. The Board of Education Facilities Report and implementation of many of the findings will increase long-term debt and place pressures on operating budgets in the future. Chief Bolter is asking for a deputy chief at a cost of $183,872 and an additional lieutenant. The presentation by Chief Bolter does not account for his time spent presently in managing the department. I am sure that one of his offices could be assigned to PR. Chief Bolter takes time to teach a class that is time away from Simsbury. We presently have expenses for labor attorneys that have not been budgeted that is over $100,000 with town and police both in disciplinary union hearings for terminated employees. Most of Chief Bolter's time this year has been spent on internal affair investigations, hearings, and termination of Sergeant Trumley. There will be additional costs when Sergeant Trumley returns to the police department to make him whole. It is alleged that Chief Bolter spends his time micromanaging the department, overseeing every aspect of the department, leaving the police officers without the ability to grow with their responsibilities. It is alleged that most of Chief Bolter's investigations have proven to be inconclusive, spending time on his personal witch hunts that are without merit than managing the department. This should not be rewarded. Adding more staff will not alleviate the internal issues dominating Chief Bolter's style of management. The $183,872 for a deputy chief and an additional lieutenant of $5,000 does not correct the institutional failures of the police department and should be eliminated. The contracted inspection services of $25,000 is an ad-needed service to inspect properties to estimate full value for assessment in conjunction with building permits and site plans that flag developments and property renovations. The inspections will add value to the grand list and more than pay for the services rendered. Adding a maintenance technician of $95,000 to the redundancies in the Public Works Department has the employees that could share maintenance with the Recreation Department. Services rendered to outside organizations should be assessed for their service. Increased funding for library materials of $20,000 should be paid through the money collected from the book sales. The Board of Selectmen should urge all outside organizations to provide cost sharing with the town. Improvements to the band shell that is used primarily by the performing arts should be paid by the performing arts. The bike and sports organizations should provide cost sharing to the town and the Board of Education. The taxpayer should not be asked to pay for services that do not directly benefit them and are not part of the town's core responsibilities. The Board of Finance is not required to micromanage the Board of Selectmen budget. It is the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen to produce a budget under the guidelines of the Board of Finance and not to kick the can down the road. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at Joan Co., and newsfeed on Facebook. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Joan. I assume there's no other public audience. So we've one item on the agenda tonight, and that is to hopefully pass a budget. I thought a good place to start would be to essentially pick up where we left off, where we had looked at different mill rate outcomes based on different budgetary assumptions. So I thought it would be helpful just to pick up with a summary of the 2 or 3 different options, and then we could pick up the conversation.
Sure, absolutely. Oh, do you want me to?
Doesn't
sorry.
this change the base assumption?
No, special revenue fund.
Yeah, but there's a contribution from the town of 25,000 that would no longer be needed.
Sure.
So it
Do you guys
does.
want me to
just
start
saying.
with the electricity memo before
Just
we
because I think
jump
it
into
does
this?
change the base.
Sure. So, so Tom Roy did take a deeper dive, a deeper analysis into our electricity costs, and did in fact find that what we had budgeted for our general fund accounts was actually pretty spot on. One point he did find in sort of doing the historical look backwards is that also I think contributing to the increase is that it looks as if we have been historically under budgeting a couple of the electricity accounts for a few of our facilities. So that also I think contributed to the increase over time. He did know that he was doing his best to estimate the impact of the solar panels on the ice rink and what that might generate in savings. His conservative estimate is that he thinks that it could generate up to $25,000 in savings that would affect the special revenue fund. I know that Tom Tyberski and I are a little nervous without 12 months worth of data to sort of anticipate any large number of savings. I think it's reasonable to say, could we see savings? Absolutely. Again, we're just a little hesitant because we don't have 12 months worth of data yet to show us what a full, calendar year looks like with the changing in seasons, et cetera. But particularly that perhaps if, folks wanted to take a look at the special revenue fund and that electric account, that, if you wanted to make a reduction, some reduction, we could discuss maybe an amount that would be appropriate, and that, again, would affect the revenue fund.
Would it be reasonable to move less money into the revenue fund, assuming the revenue fund doesn't need to spend as much money?
I mean, that could be one option. If you wanted to, again, slightly bring down that electric number and then do an offset to the general fund contribution for this year, and then work through that with the work group. You may recall
Sure.
that, utilities in general was an area that we had identified typically as a community use expenditure that is being paid for our other facilities by the general tax base as opposed to program users. So that is sort of one of the expenditures that we've highlighted for when the work group meets to really kind of talk about, again, is this a community use expenditure over time that we want the general fund to be paying for or partially be paying for? Right now, our program fees and our participants are really paying for those costs at the moment.
So is this just saying, in English, the proposed increase for the budget for electricity because of the AC in this building and the library was fairly accurate?
Fairly accurate, right? And
Okay.
we took a closer look too at our demand charges, our kilowatt hour usage, really just really dug in even deeper, and found that our estimates for the upcoming year he felt were on. So.
Well, is it really saying that we're under, where our expenditures are actually more than we are budgeting for?
Correct.
But because of the solar array, we get a credit, so we should just not do anything at all and just keep things where they are.
A little different. So the solar array on the ice rink, those electric charges are actually charged to the special revenue fund, not the general fund.
We can't use that credit.
We can.
The only way we could would be, as Sean proposed, as we said, if we reduce the contribution to the special revenue fund.
Which is up by the same amount.
Right.
Okay.
That was my point. It's just, not to take us off track, but if we believe Tom's numbers everywhere else, why wouldn't we believe this one, I guess?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then the Simsbury Farms is tracking, last year was 97 grand, this year it's tracking for 6 months at 25 grand. So, looks like it's going in the right direction. And again, I have no problem supporting the revenue fund, but if it needs 25 and we're giving it 50, well, then we gotta undo that next year.
Yeah.
So that was my only thought.
Sure. And if you'll recall, though, of the 25 that we have proposed transferring, 5 of that was actually reallocating programming money to Parks and Rec.
Okay, so if all 4 buildings were actually funded out of the same fund, the 25K savings would actually then be charged back to the under budgeting other ones, and we'd be, our general budget would be spot on where we are. We wouldn't be making any adjustments to it because of that credit. So Lisa's, the library is using what it's using.
Right, right.
But that's been fixed in the budget, so
Yeah.
my argument for the number is misplaced in that the new number is correct. The last 4 years have been incorrect.
Incorrect. Yeah.
Got it.
So, but we don't need to net it out anymore because now the right number's in there.
But nor should we go forward be questioning whether or not the usage is, the estimation on the usage is correct then, because it's tracking that way, okay.
My only point bringing this up is it seems like we had an opportunity, because if we're gonna leave one item way over budget from the projections and true everything else up, that seems inconsistent.
Yeah.
We have 2 less weeks of ice rink this year.
I get behind
In
it.
November, we started the season almost 3 weeks late because of the warm weather in October and early November. So it's not a true.
This is what's going to happen. It's not going to be a true picture this year. That's why we thought it was important to take a good look at 12 months, not the first 6 months of this.
Are we shutting the ice rink down at this point?
What's that?
Are we shutting the ice rink down?
We shut it down on Sunday night.
Which is almost a month earlier than we did last year, right?
No, it's about the same time every year.
I was gonna say, the
About the
front
same
end, the
time.
front end is where you have the variability. The back end, the shutdown is fairly consistent because it's just changing in.
It could be. I mean, if some of our youth hockey teams were going longer in the season, then it could be the first week in March. It could be to the 14th in March. It's usually in that range, but it's consistently in that range. It's the number of night events we have. It's when the rink starts. It's the temperature during the year. We might be running 1 compressor if it's really cold. We might be running 2 if it's really warm. This year, we got away with running 1 most of the season, but it may not be like that every year. We don't have
This falls into the whole, I think always use we had good insurance experience, so maybe we should use that 1 year of trending as our forecasting. No, I think we should err in the
I
conservative.
just caution you.
Yeah, err in the conservative side.
Because my point is, why do we put up the damn panels if we're not gonna get any savings?
I also feel like the way that Maria stated it, this was conservative. The savings amount of 25,000 is a conservative savings.
Okay. Again, I'm fine if nobody wants to do it, but again, 6.5 is dead on arrival when we go to the next board, so just keep that in mind as we move through.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of reducing it.
Yeah.
That's all I was saying, but let's do what Eric suggested.
Yeah, and if I
Okay.
could, again, this is very, very new information, obviously, that we got today. And so, we haven't had a lot of time to digest it. I think our, initial conversations at least were that, we understand if folks have a comfort level in reducing that number, somewhat. Our just recommendation would be that maybe we don't go quite as far into the 25 just until we have a full year of experience. But again, that we would understand if folks felt comfortable reducing that number to some number.
Yeah, I think that's where my head is at.
Yeah.
And I would ask you don't take my special event money away, the community events money away, if at all possible.
That's important.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Shall we begin with
Great,
these scenarios?
Sure. So you'll recall that, through your discussions, there were a number of possibilities to include in the chart, possible add-ons and recapping. This particular scenario includes updating the mortality tables for the pension plans. Updating the assumption of the mortality tables for the pension plans. We also built into this scenario if we were to decrease the interest rate assumption from 6.75 to 6.625. So again, taking a more gradual approach to getting to the 6.5. So that those 2 numbers for pension are included in this assumption. Where you had landed on your outside agency funding request was a possible increase of $2,000 for Interval House, an additional $5,000 for SCTV, an additional $397 for the Watershed Association, an additional $2,500 for the Chamber of Commerce, and an additional $5,000 for the Main Street Partnership. Item number 3, we're funding possibly all 4 of the service improvements. So again, recapping the inspection services for assessment, $25,000. Again, we would anticipate not the upcoming budget year, but the following budget year is where we would start to see some of the revenue generated from that. So we would gain about $65,000 in revenue, so really a net revenue gain of about $40,000, but we would see that 2 budget years out. The Parks Facility Maintenance Technician, this is the position, position and benefits. A little over $95,000. The reorganization of the administrative staff in the police department. So this would include the addition of a deputy chief position. This would increase the sworn personnel by 1 in that department, and then upgrading a sergeant to a lieutenant position. The deputy chief position with benefits was just under $184,000, and upgrading the sergeant to a lieutenant is a cost of about $5,000. And then the 4th service improvement that you all had considered were increasing the library materials. Again, this would focus on materials for basically our areas with the exception of children's. And then the 4th item, again, was that one item we caught where we under budgeted an item in the town clerk's office by $860, so just making that correction. And then if we were to add all of those pieces in to the town operating, you see that 6.69, as Sean had mentioned. The overall mill rate impact would be a 0.29 mill increase. And the impact on the median home over the course of a year would be an increase of $62.
And if we go to the 6.5, which is what the Board of Ed looks
Yeah.
like they're going to, the number's even higher, right?
Is it possible to do that or not?
Yeah. Oh, to show
Those
what?
magic fingers can,
Yeah, I'd like to look at that.
Give me a second.
Yeah, we have those pension numbers for the Board of Ed as well.
They didn't vote on it last night, but they did, the straw poll said that they're gonna move to 6.5.
So do you want to see what town and Board of Ed at 6.5?
yes.
There seemed to be a tolerance for that to be outside of the operating budget
Operating budget.
increase. Although the Board of Finance was, or the Board of Ed was pretty close.
You mean to accept that as just, as
It's a
necessary,
It's a policy decision
It's a policy
from the
decision?
Board of Finance. And
regardless of the impact?
Well, it's
Is that how they're?
challenging, it was challenging to tell. It was only, what, 0.9 over the guidance. So it didn't force them from 2.5 to 3. It forced them from, what, 2.27 to 2.59.
Correct, they started off lower,
Yeah.
so they had some room there.
Also, they have a bigger divisor.
Yeah, and then the pension
Yeah.
number for them actually isn't generally quite as impactful as it is to us because all of the certified staff members are part of the teacher's retirement system,
Right,
which
yeah.
is paid for by the state, administered by the state, and that's the bulk of their workforce. So
I
even though
understand
they have a
it's
large
having-
workforce.
It's impacting a larger pool.
Right,
I get it,
exactly.
I get it.
Exactly. It still has an impact on the budget, but not quite as drastically as it does to our budget.
But it's one of those scenarios where, I don't know what number's right. I don't know whether the 6.5 or the 6.25 or the 54.565 is right. But it's one of those things where 12 years down the road, somebody's gonna look at it and say, well, we got here because this organization did this number and this organization did this number. And that's inconsistent thinking, and so that's where I can't get my head around that, because it's not being done to make something work, but it's incongruous with just fundamental business policy, that you look at one thing one way and one thing another way. It doesn't, in the same cohort, the same people, the same area. It's as if, I could understand if you were talking about charging a cost for something that had a geographic distance to it, or had had an age weighting difference. But this is, to me, it's kind of difficult. I don't want us to be in that sort of scenario, thinking.
Honestly, I think the decision has been made for the town. It's just a matter of whether
They counted against.
where they're gonna count it, right?
Who jumps?
So I think we should just put it in, because I think that's the reality of what's going up there, and ask that it be, again, it's part of our budget increase, but again, it's not an increase that we decided to put in, and we just talk about it like that.
No.
I don't disagree with it, it's not
Yeah.
bad policy.
I mean, this is
It's
a
a quick-
policy decision that they made, and this is the cost.
Right. But from our spending side and what we control, I think we focus on that for this evening, but understand what it does to the overall mill rate, and they have to understand what it does to the overall mill rate, too.
Right, and thank you. And similar, I mean, along those lines, you'll recall from our presentation a few weeks ago, that 45% of that original 3.5% increase were pension costs. That was
costs,
just
yeah.
the ARC. So before we even start adjusting, for interest rate assumptions, before we start adjusting the mortality table,
Those are sunk
just our
costs.
ARC, it was a just under $356,000 increase. So of that number you're seeing in the town budget, that's again just a very, very significant driver for us.
So half a mil increase and then a median home impact of $107.
And what's the top line number? Core.
7.22.
Thank you.
So 0.75% on top of the other one, so it's over a point for us. 1.5.
Oh,
The entire pension change, the mortality update
Oh, it's
and the
over a
move.
million.
what was it?
I think it was over $1 million, right, in aggregate? If we did everything all at
Yeah,
once.
point. Got it. Oh, thank you.
Right, and again, this is sort of that policy conversation where, maybe ultimately this board and the Board of Finance have different visions, or maybe you ultimately end in the same place. It's right, do we just want to aggressively tackle all of it in 1 year, or is there, a tolerance for maybe, phasing that in over 2, 3, a 4-year period to get to it a little more gradually and to smooth the mill rate a little bit, or just aggressively tackle it all in one shot? And,
I guess what I'm suggesting is to save us all the anguish here is, I think you make the presentation that you two have put together, which I think is a really good one, at the Board of Finance level and talk them through it.
okay.
But we can sit here and speculate and go back and forth.
Right.
And we're really not driving that decision. We're gonna fund our pension obligations, we continue to negotiate them. And I'm fine with 675 with a path forward, I'm fine personally with 6.5 now, but everybody needs to understand what the impact to the taxpayers is.
Seems
We
like
can
we should,
spend 2 hours on it here, and we don't know what they're gonna do, is my point.
seems like we should make that the assumption. That's the information we have. And
Yeah.
then as we talk about perhaps reducing the budget, we could look at how that
X that.
impacts, yeah. Yeah.
That's what I mean, let's look at it with, and then X that, because we control X that. Is that fair?
I think so.
So you're going back to the 6.5. Oh, we're starting with 6, we're gonna work back from there.
From a mathematical standpoint, though,
Okay.
it's, how much, Amy?
For what?
Pension is costing how much out of that 1.6?
The increase, $78.
How much?
$78.
No. If we left all the pension assumptions alone, our increase would be,
Oh,
if we did nothing,
To using what number? The 625?
6.7.
75? Well, it's
Yeah,
less than
so-
the 83, so what is it?
So like no mortality tables, no
No mortality
675,
tables, no nothing.
just the ARC essentially?
Correct.
Okay.
So leaving it at 675,
Yep, 675, no mortality tables, just the ARC, the
but with
355.
with the service improvements? and
Yes, all
everything?
the
Yeah,
expenditures are the same.
Correct.
Hold on.
Thank
That's
you.
Nothing changes other than your,
Just want to know, whatever the difference is.
the contribution percentage.
And the reason this exercise is important is this is how we've talked about these policy level changes in the past. Our operating budget expenditures versus the higher level, this is what we're doing on the pension side. When they moved us from 7 to 6.75, this is the same conversation we had. There's another way to solve this, by the way.
I have one too.
What are interest rates right now?
You know what? I'm
What's
taking some dead air
What's the
time.
recommended debt service
Your
percentage change? Like, does the Board of Finance have a recommended debt service and capital percentage change? Do they give us one?
Oh, that's a little different.
Okay. I know it's different, while we were
That's
just
okay,
waiting, I wanted
sure.
to just ask if there was a number there.
Sure, so while Amy's working, the debt service number that they have been giving us to work with, along with any cash for capital capacity, is somewhere generally in between the 6.7% and 7% of the total overall operating budgets, in terms of a number to work with. So that percentage increase, would fall under that 7% overall number of the operating budgets.
Okay.
Where are they line items on here?
I think they're into the gross.
Your
Like
origin-
you guys are.
They're not in the operating.
The original budget was 355, right?
Yes, and that
And then-
included the ARC.
But
And
not the mortality table.
only the mortality table for OPEB, because we had that at the time, which was like $22,000.
Okay.
So I basically just took Maria's budget, which had no pension assumptions, except for the updated, for the OPEB, the updated mortality tables for the OPEB, and then put in all the service improvements. And we're at 5.11 increase,
Okay.
and then 0.15 mils, or $32.
So from that starting point, we're double what the Board of Finance asked us to be. Ex pension.
Right, with the ARC, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting we mess with the ARC. The ARC is our, to quote our Board of Finance friends,
Exactly.
our promise, right?
Exactly, yeah, yeah.
We're proposing, with all the stuff that we've talked about, a 5.1% increase.
That's the top
Ex
line?
pension.
Okay.
Operating.
In operating, ex pension.
All right, and
So
then-
if we had any desire to follow the guidance, then that needs to get cut in half.
Okay, so then what if, does,
That includes all those
again, these are, moving things around again, like optically helps my thought process. If you, in the assumption, how hard is it to remove assumption number 3, all the service improvements? So basically, we did not, I just want to know what, if we did not, well, I mean, we are doing number,
Essentially back to the 355, right?
so it's right spot on?
So do you want to start with this version that has no change in assumptions for the pension, or do you want to start with the 6.5 pension?
Like, yeah, with the most raw version, that's basically, so this is the 675?
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes,
This
this is
is
675,
675.
right?
No
So,
more-
yeah, just curious, with that, using that, just, and 3 comes out of what, like, 3 is where right now? Is in total town budget?
It's in total operating budget.
Total operating.
So that's what I circled, thank you, I just can't read that. Okay, that's circled.
So you want to take out all the service improvements?
Yeah, I just wanted, because that's where that's really, the point was, the exercise we just was if we just stripped everything back. Well, it's not really just stripping it. Stripping everything back is not adding anything in, really, in the literal form. So I'm just, and that gets us to the, is it really gonna, are you gonna
I think
bet on 3.55?
It'll be a little bit higher.
363?
Pretty close, I
Outside
think.
We're nickel
agencies
and
in there.
dimed on the.
Yeah, there's the nickels and outside agencies, but those are so, I mean, gosh, my goodness, that total is so small. That's
0.08%
yeah.
is what it is.
Okay, that just, so you can erase that, so
No,
that's.
no, leave that just for
So
perspective.
363,
Again, if we care at all about the guidance, which we get to decide if we do or not, we're
Right.
still over, but we're a point heavy.
yeah,
Yeah.
0.60, okay. And then that's the 675, but it is including it includes the minor outside agencies. And then other people like to look at, I'm sorry, the bottom is the what impact?
All right.
Point, okay.
0.02 or
.02, and then it's
$4.
$4, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and if I
Historically, I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead,
thanks.
Maria.
I was just going to say, just to this conversation about the Board of Finance 2.5% guidance and then the town operating, and I was just pulling back again a number we talked about a few weeks ago, but if you take out from that 3.5%, increase, the 355 for pension, and our expected contractual salary obligations, that's both general wage increases and step increases, we're still 93,000 above the Board of Finance guidance. So like if we really wanted to try to get to that, we're talking most likely about cutting programs or cutting people in order to get to their guidance.
Yeah, okay.
I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that, but
No.
that's what we need to, in our presentation, in our decision-making, in our justification, I'm not sitting here saying we should make service cuts. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, that's right there is my base, is the way I look at this, Maria.
Yep, Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify that too. I think that's a
That's a
really
great
important
perspective,
point,
what
is
you're
that our
saying.
fixed costs
That's
just on
fine.
salaries and pension are such that we couldn't meet that 2.5% target. But I also do think that, we were all very transparent with them during tri-board. When we did our estimates, we told them we thought our fixed costs were gonna be about 3.3. It came out at 3.5, so we were pretty close. We were pretty close.
Yeah, and the grand list actually was a half a point heavy. So,
So what happens, Maria, if we submit this, and you said with a 3.63, I think, what happens if the Board of Finance says, no, you still need to cut? So you just said that would be people or programs. So what happens?
Sure. So what we've done in the past, when they've asked us to consider cuts, is we've come back, the past couple of years, we've done a memo that shows all the various service improvements that have been done over, say, like the last 5 to 7 years, as sort of just a starting point. Here's what those service improvements cost. That might be a place to start, is going back and taking away some of those service improvements. We've also costed out some options about reducing hours of operations for various facilities, because that's people, and that's a big part of our budget. So we've costed out some scenarios, just to try to give the board an appreciation for ways that we could reduce the budget essentially through people. And if we're asked to do that, we could certainly update that again if we're in a situation of needing to potentially cut the budget further.
This is so going the other way with this, not the other way, but could you then, for my points here, can you change the assumption down to the 6.5 then?
And
Without keeping the increases out?
All the
Expenditure.
increases or just the agency,
Well, I can do the math. I know the agency ones are, you said 0.08?
0.08.
Yeah, okay, so if you took all the agencies out of this, the 0.08 would be right down to 363 minus 0.08 is 3.55, which is right on. So just curious, if you move the actuarial assumptions to the 6.5, did we already do that? I don't think we already did that.
that was
There's a
the
version that
7
has
right
that.
there. There it is, right there. But that includes.
But that includes the
number 3.
number 3. I'm curious, without the service enhancements,
That was 5, that was the 5.
it's 5 what? The next thing I can guarantee, the next thing I'm not gonna ask for is, well, okay, let's add only in this service enhancement and then this one. I'm just trying to say, what is the raw? That's the base, to me, I need baselines, and then I can work back off of it.
The reason I asked for this is, if you go back,
5.74.
we'll call, the other option, the 3, what was it, 363?
Yep,
Call it flat. So basically, anything above that, we are responsible for a tax increase.
yeah.
This board, based on our decisions. Outside of what the Board of Finance decides with pension, they are gonna decide whether they wanna have a tax increase for the voters or not, or the taxpayers or not, as a result of their policy decision. But if we're basically any point above the 355, the 363, we are responsible for a tax increase. I'm not saying that's good, bad, or otherwise, but as we make our decision, I think that's important perspective for us to have.
Yep.
Yep. Are you gonna erase everything I made you do? Unless somebody else
No,
wants
don't
to.
erase anything, please.
Unless somebody else wants to.
Just leave it.
And in a year of 2.5% or more growth, grand list growth, it's very challenging to then say we want to come in and have a tax increase on top of that.
Yes.
So some other items in the operating budget that, attributed to each department and things like that, is there any room in there to pull anything out? I mean, that doesn't, we're assuming everything in here is set in stone, right? And there were some things that might be somewhat questionable, and I don't know how much makes a big difference, right? So I keep going, that compensation study, which was $40,000, right, for the town,
That's capital.
that was capital? I thought it was in.
CNR.
Okay, so that
That
comes,
doesn't hit the operating budget, but yes.
it doesn't hurt the mill
Well,
rate?
it's-
It's general fund, right?
Helps them.
We put it in the CNR fund? Is that how we funded it, or we funded it with?
Right,
cash?
we put it in the CNR fund.
Okay.
So no, because we're gonna spend the 416.
Right, on
So
other,
unless we
on other
propose we come
things.
down on the 416, which we're not, it doesn't, if we
But
take
something
that out.
like the playground,
But that's also in here too,
playscape,
right?
that's not,
If it was,
Can I,
but that's reoccurring though. The theory is that the playscape funding is reoccurring.
That's the theory, right?
Correct.
That we would be making that investment on an annual basis.
So you're saying those things don't impact the operating budget at all?
it's not as simple as that. It depends on what we do with everything else. If you reduce a CNR project
Which
that's
is-
coming out of the CNR account and you don't replace it,
Okay,
then technically, yes, but you've reduced it by 1/5 of 40.
If it's part of the 416, there was a proposed additional cash contribution to cover some of the smaller projects.
That's my second point, is if you then use the 500 or the 555 or whatever that was coming out of cash, that reduces it dollar for dollar if we bring those projects down. So if you swap the 40 out of the 416 CNR, put one of the cash reserve projects into the 416 number, then yeah, you've reduced the mill rate, or you've reduced the budgetary impact by $40,000. Yes, you can do that. We just gotta move everything around, which is something we can do. But before we did that exercise, I think we should stay on operating.
Okay.
Well, one distinction I want to make is what problem we're solving. If our goal is to reduce operating, that's one conversation. If our goal is to bring the mill rate down, I think we have a lot more options to talk about. So,
What's our job?
what's our job? You're going to go toward operating.
Our job's to run the town, right? Our job is really, our decisions impact the mill rate, but the mill rate is not our
Yeah,
responsibility.
it's to meet the service expectations of the residents of the town of Simsbury, which is the operating.
So if we don't need it, or if we don't want it, then it shouldn't be in operating or capital. If we need it, then it should be there. So we still need to decide, is everything in here, to Wendy's point, what we need to have? And Wendy, so to Maria's point earlier, a lot of these items are set in stone because we're not willing to
Reduce our
reduce
services.
staff, reduce services.
Yeah, okay.
So
I get that.
the quickest, easiest way, and the most awful way, is to reduce the FTE line items. The only other place we've ever gone are trees, road and drainage supplies, paving supplies, some of the material accounts. But that means less miles paved, it means less trees cut, but it's not people. Nothing anybody out here recommends. It also means we don't do more materials in the library. It's you save the people by not investing in the stuff that fills the shelves, which is good for a year, but not a good long-term solution.
So my feeling is, does it feel good to have any tax increase in a year that we've had such groundless growth? Of course it doesn't. And I think that there are we should look hard, and I think we should make some tough decisions tonight. There may be things that we can trim. But I think at the end of the day, most of our residents would rather have a small tax increase that is less than the than the inflation rate, less than the cost of living increase, et cetera, and not lose Sunday hours at the library.
I'd beg to
As
differ
just
with
one
that,
example. Say that again?
I'd beg to differ with doing a tax increase in a year that our grand list has grown so much. And also, again, we have to think a little bit more globally, strategically, next year with our facilities master plan and the schools master plan. So we have a pretty much assumed increase next year.
Yeah.
So I think if we could come in with no increase this year, that would be what the taxpayers would want and maybe expect.
There's a policy decision we've been talking about that's driven by the Board of Finance that's having a significant impact in this decision.
I guess the reason I started off with what I started with is they own that.
Yeah.
It's to me, they're the fiscal officers of the
Okay.
town, and again, if we negotiate the contracts, I'm not passing the buck on that. We pay the people, we do the FTEs, we do the operating side of it, but that's a strategic financial policy decision, much like the mill rate is. And again, I'm not walking away from it, but I don't control independently the pension number. The Board of Finance does through its authority over our two boards. Amy, is that fair, way to look at it?
Jackie's point is something that I grapple with as well. And I don't want to distill it down to, just because you have it, you should spend it. That's too juvenile of a statement as far as I'm concerned. It's too simplistic. Because I do respect, in a period of growth, it would be an incredible delivery on behalf of this board to not have a tax increase. Because I don't know when, that's a unicorn, right? I don't know, with what's coming, is that ever gonna be possible to have the luxury of saying that again?
Done it a couple times.
Yeah, but we've done it a couple times, but not with what I think is coming. I mean,
Yeah.
okay?
Agreed.
So, so why I speak against that principle, is that when I look at some of what's requested, I don't know when we're ever gonna be able to afford $20,000 of library materials, which I'm being told are sorely needed, right? So if we can't afford it this year, well, with what's coming, we're never gonna be able to afford it. So I'm sort of breaking these things down in the sense that I'm not just spending it because we're in the luxury of a position where we have an opportunity to invest. This would be the only time likely I see that we could conceivably make an investment. I don't know, Tom Taberski, talks about what we are facing in the Parks and Rec area relative to really asking, how much longer can we ask those folks to do what they're doing with what they have and deliver the service expectations that people are expecting? The trees, the tree service, but that's another, the open space. The trees aren't getting any newer, any younger, and they're gonna become more likely and of need. So, again, we will not have an opportunity, I foresee, for us to make these service improvements in the future. So, I look at them truly as service improvements as opposed to adding a splash pad. Okay,
Yep.
or adding or creating a new experience or service enhancement. So that's
So-
just want to get, that's what how I
I
look
don't
at these.
disagree with these items. My question, this goes back to maybe Monday night when we talked about this. I don't think any of these are frivolous by any means, okay? I do think that if they are sorely needed, they should be in the budget already, whether it's the operating or the capital. They should have been in there. They should not be extra items. So then we would not have to look at taking them out.
So they would have, so these
It
would have
would
been
have been-
identified by the functional areas that that or have responsibility for them as budget requirements for operating moving forward then.
Yes.
Yeah, no asterisk on the bottom of the
Or to
budget,
say
but
that
then
the-
you guys said that's, the service requests always are like that, right?
That was the explanation. Go ahead, Sean.
Well, they are because you're increasing the budget. So
But-
unless you're suggesting that a corresponding cut was made somewhere else to put them in. So if that's what you're suggesting, the math works. If you just wanted them in, that's what it looks like. Maria's budget would have come to us looking like that if they were in.
The budget came to us over, though, to
I know,
start
but
with.
My point is,
Okay.
it would come in, we just made it
Because
even
they're
higher.
in there, right?
Right.
And remember, these service improvements don't go away, so
No, they carried forward.
Right,
Correct.
so, an investment, and I was just thinking, I don't know if, meandering a little bit here, is can we do a one-time larger contribution in CNR to the library materials? So that we're not increasing the base into perpetuity. And that's where we prioritize capital.
So speak to that then. Is it?
We take 80 grand out of capital somewhere else, we don't do a truck, and we give 80 grand to the library instead of 20 grand, and now they get 4 years' worth of materials and they get to build up their stock. That's what I'm suggesting, is a potential option.
I mean, the reason we're in this situation now with library materials being so far behind is because we've been inadequately funding them for 12 years now.
Agreed, I'm not saying it's a good idea, I'm just saying it's another,
Yeah,
it's another lever to pull.
I would say the same thing about what Chris is saying with the rep position. Those positions were eliminated over a decade ago, and they've been repeatedly asked for year after year after year. Jackie, that's why they're not in there, is because they've been repeatedly denied because of the same decisions you're trying to make right now. And you're just kicking the can down the road.
Is the deputy chief position's been asked for year after year also?
No.
That's a relatively new ask?
Last 2 years.
Okay, but it was pushed down.
There was a
More questions?
unaffiliated position, it was called a captain,
Okay,
2 years ago.
okay.
And where did that guy go?
Got the best promotion.
I always want to, I don't mean to be a Six Sigma guy, but I keep going, what's the problem we're solving? I'm hearing passion by some members of this board to want to have no tax increase, or no tax increase that is attributable to us. There are items in capital that we could cut that would speak to the mill rate. Is that something that is amenable to people to talk about? Or we really want to focus on operating?
So,
Well, if,
go ahead, Melanie, go ahead,
well, if it
Melanie.
hits, you're saying that some of this will impact the operating, like, or the mill rate? It'll impact the mill rate, but not the operating?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if there's things in here that could get moved, then they should be moved anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, I flagged a few items that we could talk about in capital if the goal is to keep the mill rate in check.
So the problem with that is that we have guidance, and we don't yet know that we're gonna get the 555 of cash. So we could be having the same problem where we still have to cut the operating budget, and we lost all that 555, and we still have to do a capital exercise. Which is why I don't necessarily wanna spend a ton of time right now, because we don't yet have the guidance we need on that. I think, our job is to focus on the operating budget and advocate on behalf of the town, what this town needs to maintain service and improve service where it makes sense. We've added staff every year for the last 4 years, I believe.
Probably more than that, if we went back and looked at that
Yeah,
memo.
and in the building inspector, the accountant, the social services staff, there was 2 police officers years ago.
A dispatcher, I believe,
a
an
dispatcher.
engineer, project administrator, public works. Yeah, most of these were pre-me, so if I'm
Okay,
losing
a
track.
custodian,
and I
unfortunately,
think a
never been for
custodian
Tom.
and a truck driver. Right, none of which
At some point,
were
it's gotta be
for
his
Parks
turn
and
too,
Rec.
but again, we have not abdicated our responsibility in terms of responding to the needs and growth of this town. So I also don't think, and I'm gonna talk out of both sides of my mouth here, it's irresponsible for us to send up a position or two to the Board of Finance. That is consistent with what we've done. It's our job to tell them what we think this town needs to, we can call it improve, or we can say it's maintain. And most of the time, it's to maintain services. And when we made the social services case, the caseload down there was massive. We were not improving service. We were responding to service needs that were already there. And you can make an argument that's what Tom's needs are, that's what the chief's needs are. Those, to me, Amy's assessor inspection is gonna more than pay for itself. That doesn't even count in the 1 or 2 adds to staff. It just makes sense, but.
And I think that's why I'm struggling so much, because this budget is not a flashy budget, it is a maintenance budget. Even the vast majority of the improvements I look at as items that you do when not only are you growing town in population, but you've acquired more park space than you had in years past. And I know this isn't the conversation we're going to have tonight, but if my feeling has been, and this is what I've been thinking about the last couple days, is that if we're not going to adequately staff the Parks Department, and I'm singling you out in particular only because it's the easiest one, then we should talk about how to reduce the park footprint long-term. If that's the policy decision we're.
I agree. If we're gonna buy it, we gotta maintain it.
Yeah,
I
that's
agree.
all I'm saying.
You're right.
So I agree with that. That's a good point.
And, yeah, especially in light of, again, what is likely coming for,
Yeah.
for the, no, you guys are lucky, I just lost my train of thought.
Okay.
But it will come back.
Always does.
Related to the operating budget, I just want to throw this out because it was planted in my ear. So, we're just looking at mostly expenses. We don't look at the revenues, right? Like we assume the revenues are.
We do a little bit with revenue, so, again, we do have a revenue tab in here. We did refine our revenue budgeting process quite a bit last year, so I think that our revenue estimates are much improved. I don't think this board in the past has typically spent a lot of time on it, but it's something we could talk about if folks have an interest
Well,
in it.
the only reason I was bringing it up is because with the COVID 19 coming, is that going to hit us anywhere in revenue if things escalate in closures and things like that, right? And do we have reserves or whatever? Do we have
so dependent
money to
upon-
cover that if
Property
something
We're so
happens?
dependent on property tax, I don't know how
The
much
ECS
revenue is out.
revenue, right.
Still gotta pay your property tax even if you have coronavirus.
Sure.
We have to, but what I'm saying is, if people don't want to go to a camp or the PAC, or, not that the PAC is our budget, but, the pool or
Yeah, I mean,
something.
it's difficult right now.
It's not a big budget.
Knowing what we all know now.
Yeah,
You know, to predict where the coronavirus is going to be, what we're going to be dealing with in June at
right,
this point. So we're projecting a normal year.
okay.
Certainly, things could change, but that's going to change because it dictates change, and we can't forecast that in December. We were doing this budget before this even hit at that point.
Yeah. It was
And
pretty
even now,
fast.
it'd be very hard to predict what's going to happen post-July 1.
There's also a lot of answer, but that's also walled off from the special revenue fund. not
So that what
part
I'm
of
saying,
it.
is there reserve, is what, if something happened, do you use reserves to compensate for
We
the loss of revenue?
do.
We
I mean,
do.
that's-
Okay, that's, I just
essentially-
wanted to
Operating
ask that.
transfers,
Yeah,
yeah.
everything in the
Okay.
revenue fund is supposed to pay for itself. So if we don't run a camp, we're not paying the counties.
Exactly.
Okay,
We're not paying the
gotcha.
contractor.
Gotcha.
So
It should even out in that case. If we're running a camp on lower numbers, that's a different story.
But the golf course.
So if
and the
nobody's
pool,
golfing, yeah, in the pool.
We still gotta pay, I mean, we still have to pay to keep the course open, we still have to pay to
Maintenance,
maintain
yeah.
it, so it's not, it doesn't go to zero.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
but
there
we
are,
should
Tom
have,
has levers to pull.
okay,
But this is the challenge we've been in with the revenue fund, Wendy, is the revenue doesn't hit the expenditures and hasn't for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's not Tom's fault, and it's not anybody down there's fault. And that's why we need to fix how we do the revenue fund.
okay.
Because we are moving money either from reserves or operating, like we are this year. We're putting an extra 25 in to prop that fund up because there's a delta in revenues to expenditures,
Okay.
or a difference.
Okay, so what are we doing?
Only catching up.
This is a lot of
get back
stuff
to
here.
Question,
Well-
question.
Let me get back on.
I'm hearing feedback that there may be some interest in entertaining a conversation to talk about ways to lower the operating budget. Were you going to go somewhere else, Chris?
What I was gonna go is, I don't want us to, I think that personally, I think the service improvement, service reduction sort of study, you might as well just pull the old one out and just put just stamp the new one as far as I'm concerned. It's currently dated, because they're completely impractical. You look at them, it's an honest effort by our town staff, but we just don't do that. It's just, going to, doing what you do at the library, do at the town, it's kind of like, you go through the exercise, but we always kind of emotionally land back on, no, we're not gonna do that. And that's, because what I would hope is that that the leaders of the functional areas are already running an efficient, lean organization, so we shouldn't have to be doing that repeatedly to make our numbers. We have a bigger issue if those operating costs aren't accurate, right?
Agreed, 100%.
So I don't really want to go through the effort, and it's not because I don't want you guys to see it. I'll give you mine from
I get
last
it.
year. I'll change the date on it, and you can say you saw this year's version.
That's why we go, in all honesty, the only thing you can actually cut here is road and drainage supplies, tree work, and, the consultant stuff. That's in the operating budget. If we're gonna cut anything, that's really the only thing we can cut, unless we're willing to entertain cutting people,
Right.
which I don't think any of us are.
No.
Right, and no, and that's a fair point. And then we often are playing catch-up, right? If we cut now, then we're trying to play catch-up a year or two from now.
We're going to add the cost back next year supposedly.
Right.
We got to bring that back just because Tom lost whomever is the person who gets the cut is going to be back in that seat saying, I'm asking for it because last year you cut it. It's just the same, we could just replay the tape again, right? So,
Yes, yes.
sorry. Not to be flippant, but that's,
You're right.
I've been sitting in this budget stuff too long.
Yeah.
Which is why we flip to what we add, and I think we need to take a stand on what our priorities are on 3. Because I don't think we can, I'm not comfortable asking for all of that. I don't think that's
Fair enough.
something that I can stand behind, given the fact that what it's gonna do to the taxpayers. I think they're all worthy projects, but there's a ranking for the worthiness.
Do we look at those and also some of the other requests that are in the budget for, there may be one-timers, but
Such as,
the paving study, the park, the playground, I'm talking those as well. Those are things that are in there, I know they're not continuous, but they're in there this year that weren't in there last year.
just pave that parking lot.
Are you talking about the paving of?
Just pave the parking lot.
PAC?
Yeah, the engineering study.
Just pave the damn
and all that.
parking lot.
Okay, then if you go, we heard so much public audience on that.
I'm not saying it's not,
It's
I'm not
bureaucracy
saying,
at its best. We
I'm
gotta
not
do a
saying
study and 27 commissions, and we gotta make sure there's no newts
But
down
there was
there.
also, there's remedial
hold on, for
measures.
the cameras,
Could be
I'm not
taken.
saying we don't pave the parking
Oh my
lot.
God.
Gosh, no, not at all. I'm saying, is the is the study really fully necessary? We had public audience, we had an informed citizen question whether the full cost should be done by engineer, both properties done by the engineer, could be town asset. I'm thinking about that concept.
There's a
I'm
lot
not
of
saying don't get rid
there's a
of it.
lot of perspective there, Chris. Though, but the problem is that as much as I just flippantly said, "Let's pave the parking lot," in the regulatory environment in the way the boards and commissions, and all the authority that all the boards and commissions have, we can't just pave the parking lot. And
That's
unfortunately, because of we all love to have input, and we should, in transparency, we now have to spend 30 grand to navigate our own bureaucracy to pave our own damn parking lot. Is the reality of it, right?
But Sean, can't we
Right.
have
In
engineers?
order to do something down there, and ultimately it might not be paving, it could be maybe something like geoblock pavers or some other surface. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of wetlands challenges and in certain circumstances floodplain challenges as well. So in order to get the design that's
Regulatory
going to
bodies,
get us
commissions,
through all the
et cetera.
regulatory bodies, exactly, at both the local, state level.
I was just bringing that up
Remember that
as,
when I rail about small government.
Yeah.
that's a sermon.
That is one of my
Okay.
sermons. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
This is what big government
This
does.
is,
It forces us
I
to
was
spend
just
money.
bringing those in because those are additional, those are add to the budget, that's all. Whether you can say, no, it's not worth talking about those, let's just focus on these number three, fine. I'll
The
stop.
problem is, Chris, is we need to pave that parking lot because of all the accessibility issues. And the only way to do that.
Oh, no, what I was
is to
saying was
navigate
bring
this
up, yeah,
process.
I was saying was should we look at all, should we be looking at all the things we're adding into the budget to be fair to the 5 that we are potentially about to target, that's all.
Yeah, I
And the
agree.
paving is the foregone conclusion, I'm just saying going at it that way. I don't
Yeah, but again, we can't put some of these in capital.
agree.
So it depends on the philosophy. Are we trying to lower the mill rate, or are we trying to lower our budget number?
Yeah.
Eric's point of process.
Number 3,
I
let's go.
listen to you.
Thank you. So if we're, to Sean's question before, which of these would we want to keep? I think number 1 is the no-brainer to keep.
Yep. Because it's going to pay for itself maybe
They'll
times,
generate revenue.
many
And
times.
several?
The assessor revenue inspection services,
Yes.
yeah, again, I don't even view that as a service improvement. That's we should have been doing it, and it's not actually gonna cost us anything.
Is this with everything that, and you're pulling them out from here, is that?
No, everything is in there right
It-
now.
This is
so you
back in,
guys-
this is the worst case scenario.
Okay.
So what I was suggesting is we all
What's
stay.
that?
I prefer to think of it as the best case scenario.
We're trying to work, this is what we really, the worst case for us as far as having to explain.
Again, I have my perspective, but we can, if the board votes to send 722, you can. But I am 98% sure we will be back here about to do this exercise that I'm suggesting we do.
Okay.
So,
What if we do at least part of the exercise and see how it feels, and see what impact it has? And then, but we could still consider recommending the whole thing if we wanted to, after we do the exercise.
So that's, you mean what Sean cautioned us on, which is sending,
it's just my
Sending
opinion. It's,
to- yeah,
we don't-
okay.
no,
I'm
again,
just-
it's just perspective. It
keep-
doesn't mean
yeah.
I'm right. Everybody, I'm rarely correct, but.
who wants to take a bullet and take,
You want me to go through
Well,
those?
yeah, somebody's gotta step up and
I'll
take
go
a
through
bullet,
the
right?
list. So the assessor's spectre service, I think, is 1. I think the deputy chief is 2.
Yep.
I think, I mean, the sergeant to lieutenant is nominal. So I kind of look at that with the deputy chief together, as
Yeah.
that's 2 together. And then it's the parks facility tech is 3, and the materials is 4.
I look at the library materials as sort of nominal, and so,
Yeah,
like, why would you cut that? It's just not, if it's been how many years waiting for it, it's not, to me, that's not a big figure.
It's not, but they're not starting at 0 either.
It was neither, was a police department.
No.
Okay, and so you could, I've had people ask me about,
Sure.
the library materials is, it's a little draconian to describe it this way, but you could end up where you don't have anything on the shelf potentially, right, of quality. And.
That was if it was at zero, yeah.
Right, but we're not keeping pace. The cost of the materials are gonna go up. The types of materials we're gonna buy, we're gonna have to buy and expand, 5 years from now, the kinds of materials that are gonna be required are gonna be completely different. Those costs are gonna be
I buy that.
additive. So the zero baseline is shrinking for what, how far you can stretch that dollar. So to me, you're not only playing catch up, but you're building into what the cost of that. We spend so much freaking money. Can I say? I mean, yeah, on that library over the years, right? And clearly because well, maybe I should talk myself out of we spend too much. No,
We don't.
We have clearly made it a priority that is one of the gems of the town, right?
It is. It's worth every penny we've invested.
So to me, that's why it's not something that is it's not lessened. Now, I'll play devil's advocate with the deputy chief now. I love the police department. Don't get me wrong. It's been a lot of time. I don't. That's diminishing. And I wonder, the chief does a fantastic job. His lieutenants are top. The sergeants are tops, right? And what some people would ask me is that one of the good things about the police department, I think, is we don't see what's wrong, or all we see is what's right with the police department, because we have such a great experience from them, right? The experience isn't lacking. It's them themselves that identify how much better I think that the service experience could be for what the town could get, and for the service experience for the employees themselves, the officers who are working in that department. Their job could be better. But I wonder, and I ask the chief, is it, you do so much with who you are right now, and is this something that is designing and building for the police department modeling of the future, because that's where we're evolving to in the guidance that we're getting? Or is this to dynamically change the service delivery of the police department today?
Latter. Yep. We need it today to make some changes and to keep up, especially in the area of policies, best practices with accreditation. There's just, I'm sure like everybody else, there's just too many piles with everybody. And this proposed structure will help that significantly.
You've also got more coming down the pipe of cameras, policies. There's more administration, there's more mandates coming down, much like we experienced at the school, right? Your responsibilities don't lessen from the Capitol, they increase.
They don't, and everything has, not necessarily the number of calls for service that you see, those numbers haven't necessarily increased, but the amount of work that goes into everything. So a new piece of equipment, a new policy, a new procedure, a new requirement, or a new mandate, it's not as simple as, okay, now do this. It takes a lot of time to put something together. I'm sure you know. And then, while you're doing that, other things are put on the back burner. So right now, we have 2 lieutenants with some significant responsibilities underneath them. We need to divide those up. Another thing that we've been really battling with is getting the administration out there, out in the public. It doesn't happen now, and it really should happen on a regular basis. It helps to establish trust with the community, legitimacy. It allows us to figure out what is going on if we don't get all of that feedback, and people want to talk to maybe the chief or to a lieutenant or a deputy chief, as opposed to talking to the officer who comes in to the business or before the Chamber of Commerce, whatever it may be. That's really important, and we have been lacking that because we don't have the time for that.
And again, I'm not questioning that. What I see is that most of the public is like I'm the public. I'm uninformed in the sense that, not uninformed by by choice, but just by exposure or lack of interest. When Tom says, I had the presentations, I've had multiple people come to me, they're paying attention to what's going on in the narratives that are being brought to us. When Tom says, we in our area lost X years ago, and that's something that people can respond to. That's a takeaway, and then there's the addition on top, which is all the stuff that we're making the Parks and Rec responsible for, the ever expanding open space, and then the concept of maintenance and upkeep and all that. But for the most part, to say that people feel so wonderfully about the police department, they don't see it as if the police department has a challenge inside of it. That's why, because it's not apparent to them.
Well, I was going to just weigh in, not to bring, but you know, there's been some perception issues this year, right? We've had a lot of, and my feeling is to have additional leadership in the police department has maybe not we still roll up to the same place, but a little bit more hierarchy and spread, if that people can take on more at a higher level. And that's where I'm thinking, that it may help in that actual or perceived public image that we're adding more.
Make sure there's more narrative added to it, because the last thing I'm here is to disprove the narrative. That's not all I'm just adding.
No.
So the body cameras are probably a very good example.
Yeah.
When they eventually come, whether it's because the town has chosen to have body cameras or because it becomes a state mandate.
Right.
And it already is basically a standard now in.
Good, that's a sunk cost, those are paid.
Yeah, so it's not just the cost of purchasing those that you see.
It's all the upkeep, the paperwork, it's recertifying.
When that's used,
The policies.
when that's used and we have a request to release that information,
We know who's gonna do that.
and that takes a lot of time. It's not a matter of click, click, boom, it's out there. Every single request, and it has to be done in a certain amount of time. I mean, right now, there's already state statute that requires 72 hours after a use of force incident, or after something has been recorded, it has to be released, or 24 hours after, or 48 hours after the officer has been able to view that. So putting that together is quite a task. So we don't really have the personnel to manage that. So along with body camera comes the assignment of somebody to be responsible for that, and then be able to deal with that. And every item has something similar to that. Every bit of technology that we come across, we were very fortunate with IT that they were able to dedicate a lot of time to us, but it spreads so thin.
Narcan's a great example. Narcan didn't exist 20 years ago.
Right.
And so now, every time there is a massive amount of administrivia, which I understand has to go with the usage and storage and application of Narcan. Great example.
And not nearly as much. I'm very proud to say that we were one of the first departments to use that. March of 2015, we came on, and there were very, very few that had that service. But that was an easier one. It took me about a month to put that all together. We found funding, boom, it's out there. And now we do regular training on that. But that is minimal compared to the amount of time it takes for all of these other things. It's much more valuable to the community.
I'm trying to give you an example of a cost that didn't exist before. Those are costs. Process is cost.
Let me sum it up from this standpoint, guys. This is my personal philosophy of what I was elected to do when I sit up here. To your point of the public doesn't pay attention, that means we're doing our job. In all seriousness, this is not disrespectful to any other department, but we are here to keep people safe, to plow roads, to pave roads, to have them, to have a responsible place to pay their taxes, to do all the stuff with town clerk. And we get to do a lot of great stuff with recreation, we get to do a lot of great stuff with library. And this is not a knock on recreation or anything, but if I have to pick between a police department and a recreation department, I pick a police department every single time. I'm here first for safety. Everything else is second, is at least my personal philosophy. So when the chief and the police commission tell me that this is what's needed to maintain or not let us slide backwards on the quality of service in this community, I pay attention. That's why we added 2 officers previously. We didn't technically need them at that moment, but look at all the apartments we built, and we needed them too. And there's a time and a way to get this stuff into the budget. So that's why I ranked the police spot. And again, it's not knocking library, it's not knocking public works, Tom's group, all critically important, but my job is to provide public safety first and foremost.
So I'm going to move to another. So that parks facility maintenance position, is that one person? Could it be a half-time person? Is
It's one person, but that person wouldn't, we're calling it a parks and facility maintenance technician, carpentry, plumbing, electrical skills. When those things aren't going on, they're still gonna be out there mowing, lining, doing the things that our guys do to make sure that the fields are open, the facilities are open.
Okay.
And maintained in a safe way. Things have fallen behind. With the, you know, he made a great case, Sean just made a great case for the place. I'm not looking to disprove that at all, like what Chris said. It is needed. And I keep going back to not looking at what's in front of you, like what you said before with the open space piece that could be coming down the line. You have to look at what's behind you. 15 years with us dealing without those two positions, you have facilities falling in disrepair, you've added facilities, you've added new parks, you've added new open spaces. You can't ignore that fact. That's and I totally agree, public safety is very important, and but you know, there might be a possibility to do both of them, not having to pick one or the other. But you have to look at what you've added, and then you see the case for why we need
You're
the
about to,
position.
and, you know, we're about to fund. I mentioned this playscape thing too many times. I am pleased to whoever I'm not anti-playscape.
It's Eric's neighborhood, it's
that
okay.
not-
No, you know what, I'm
okay.
gonna move to cut that one, I'm serious.
No, but I mean, so if we put new playscapes in, invest in them, that's maintenance on those, that's upkeep on those. If we do something with more open space, or we do something with, we have an explosive, we're in an upswing again with youth sports again. It's going to require more maintenance of those and adding the experience of those. So that's an example of us investing in what we already have that's sorely already been underfunded and building into, so. And
You're right, but again, what we've had and what you've added. Forget the growth we're gonna have in the future. I'll be back here in 2-3 years if we keep growing, asking me for more people. That'll be needed, and there'll be a case for it. I'm trying to make the case, and I think Maria's made the case, for what you've added and what we haven't had.
So here's my frame on this. I completely agree with Sean's comment about public safety. I agree with the order in which he ranked these things. I think that the only way that I could get behind not funding that position for parks would be if this board were willing to entertain a conversation in a couple of months when Tom comes back to us and says, these are the things we're not going to get to, and we're going to be okay with that. And I think the $25,000 for the playscape, I'd be okay with cutting that, as long as there's also a recommendation in a few months about which playground we pull out, remove. I think that's the decision this board can make. But if we're not going to fund our assets, then we should have fewer assets.
100% agree.
Okay.
Great.
I agree.
Okay.
So the reason why I'm going to support, why I would support this, what's up here as it is because I think that this is the expectation of most people in our community. And that's my belief. To continue to support the level of service that we have in this town.
I 100% agree with that, and I would not be saying that if we were adding I don't even know when, at least on my tenure on the board, I don't remember us adding anything experientially for this. So we're not spending anything that's not, to me, that's not necessary. And that's why I'm very comfortable, because nobody can poke a hole in the chief's explanation of what he needs, because he's an expert, and the commission has already looked at this, and there's no doubt in my mind that it's critically needed. Same thing with the parks maintenance facility technician. There's not one person that can, because I believe them. I believe it's there, and I believe what can add to what the people in Simsbury need and want. And we're not delivering what we can for them on those. Sorry about our use of splash pads. I'm running out of examples, but we're not adding anything.
I'll take it off the table, Chris.
I know, but I'm saying it's easier I think it's optically, I hope people understand that we're not spending money.
We're not adding extras.
Yes, that's very important. that's why, the other night, I know I got a lot of flack for people with the press box on the bleachers, not literally, and I want the bleachers, but I'm asking, okay, how can I get the study for the parking funded by not putting the press box on? Let's look at the bleachers. That's the way I think, so.
So we got two paths here.
I want to push forward with this and fight. That's my preference, not fight.
Make our case.
Make our case the narrative, because none of the people on the Board of Finance, I think, don't agree that they're town residents. They want to be as safe as possible. They want that library to be as best as it can be. They want the parks to be where they are. None of them are anti any of that, and it's why I have this challenge in my head with this whole thing about back and forth dynamic between what we own and what the Board of Finance owns, what they can say no to us, what they can't, because if they're not going to be there together every single one of these meetings, hearing all these narratives, then we're doing ourselves and them a disservice. That's a whole different sermon and narrative.
Just
It's like,
right, and I think the challenge that I'm hearing that you're struggling with is sort of like this dilemma, right, of managing the mill rate, managing operating, because I know that you've heard now for a couple of years in a row, particularly around the park staffing and police staffing, is that we need it. We've identified it as a need for a few years. Those 4 particular service improvements in aggregate, it's about a 0.1 mill rate increase, or it was an increase to the median valued home of about $26, right? So when we're looking at the service improvements in isolation, it's not a large, tax increase. But again, I think that's when we're looking at the larger mill rate with policy kind of unknowns from, the Board of Finance where they're going to land, particularly around pension. I think that's really where the core struggle is going to be. Again, my professional advice as the manager, obviously policy decisions are yours, is that, I think that particularly in the areas of parks and police staffing and these other 2 service improvements, I think that those are very much needed. I think we can get to where we want to get with pension. I don't believe our pension funding is in a crisis situation. I think we can do that gradually. I think we can phase that in to help manage the mill rate. But I do also understand that that's just my advice, and the policy decision, obviously, the recommendation rests with you all, and, that decision lies with the Board of Finance, and that's the important policy setting function that you all have. It's just what I can offer in terms of my professional advice in terms of how I would recommend proceeding, but I respect, whatever decision that you all feel most comfortable with, of course.
But if we phase in the pension, which I'm fine with that, is Board of Finance going to then ask us to come back to where we are right now?
They might.
That's the concern. And then again, like Sean said, if they do ask for us to meet what they've asked, the mortality tables and the 6.5, then we're back here and maybe cutting something, and
That could happen,
You don't think the 6.625 would be like a nice gesture? We're trying to get there, we're compromising, and it didn't, going to the 6.7 to the 6.5 really showed a big difference, like in the numbers that Amy had up there, like 107, and I think before that it was 62, which to me, that's a big difference. But again, I get if they're gonna just go say, no way.
I would be in favor of that.
They made it clear last night that straw poll was they're going to 6.5.
Well-
So we can gesture all we want, but they
But we could
made
try.
it clear.
I mean, it's,
Well, we could also come in with the budget that we think our residents need, and if they're concerned about the mill rate, that's a lever they have.
Yep, that's why I was trying to separate it from the beginning. But I think, so taking ours out, we're at 5.5, 5.25. I do not support 5.25, but it sounds like there's votes to pass it, so if you guys want to send it up, that's fine.
what's the 5?
Taking the pension out of that.
We don't include.
6.69, isn't it?
I'm saying you're talking about that, but the actual part that you've impacted is 5.1, 5.2. And I support the chief's position. I'm not against some of the services in there. I'm not against funding Interval House, but we're gonna be back here. It's just a matter of how we're doing this. So we can either spend all night and try to get to a different number, or you guys can send it up. And then if they send us back, then we'll do the exercise, and I'm very happy if I'm wrong. But I do not support the increase that's on the table. But I'm only one vote, and it sounds like there are 3 to pass it, so somebody can call the question and we can all go home.
So is a percentage change with the, let's say the 6.625 is 6.69? I think, that's on the printed sheet, so this,
Oh,
I think, is that what I'm?
Yes, the
Okay,
6625 with
includes all the
mortality
services.
tables, the service improvements, as well as the increases for the outside agencies was the 669.
So I'm not, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not opposed to going through the exercise, but I haven't heard any specific ideas about what we would
Yeah.
cut up to this point. So
So I gave you the
think we could-
prioritization.
Yeah.
And we haven't debated the agency funding requests. Again, I still think that 25 comes out from the operating transfer. We can talk about, I mean,
Yeah.
but again, then we're I mean, I have suggestions, but if the board is comfortable with what's up there, then that's what folks should go with.
I'd like to hear the suggestions.
I have made them. I've made them
Yeah.
for 3 days.
I
Yeah, I'm
don't.
sorry, we're going around in circles.
Well, what I think it was, so you're right, because I'm gonna go for, I'm gonna go for everything, or I'm gonna go for nothing. That's the way I look at this. Because the guidance is a certain budget increase and a certain mill rate impact only. The only way to meet those is to do nothing, is to increase the cost by 0. So we either do that, or because I'm not gonna sit here and prioritize one department's needs over another department. It's just, because I think they're all of value. And the mill rate's gonna go up with your, excuse me, not yours. The mill rate's gonna go up with the chief of police added to it. So then, why can't I increase the mill rate for the people who need the library materials? Why can't I? It's just, so that's.
I'm not arguing with you.
Because if the guidance was, well, get yourselves to a increase of 4.9, then we should get, that's what they should have come out with. If that's how we're doing it from the back end backwards, as far as the impact of the budget. That's kind of where I am. I don't think we should be debating which one to cut out or not, because it's like going, to me, it's sort of like going to the whole, the exercise of, let's cut town hours by this and that. It's just not realistic.
And these agency fundings, if you were to take them out, what would it change it by, like $1?
0.083.
You know what I mean? You don't have to do
Oh,
it.
agency.
But like the
Sean's right.
62 would be
Yeah.
61.
0.083.
Yeah.
That doesn't,
Right, it shouldn't impact
it doesn't
the bottom
move the
line.
needle.
I don't
So-
disagree with you, Wendy, but you laugh, but we've gotten down to the
Oh, yeah.
$2,500 before.
We said
Where
that's
the
how
Board of
we-
Finance has asked us to cut another $2,500.
So we could,
or
I mean,
another
I could
5,000,
pull a
so-
few things out.
That's
if
how we-
you
Yeah,
asked me,
it's
but
gotten that granular.
That's how we got to the chamber's contribution, and the Main Street was like, okay, well, let's go to, let's cut 1,000 versus this, and that's.
Well,
This is an order of operations, guys. My push for 9 years on this board, this is my 9th budget, is to save us the anguish of going back and forth later, and I've learned from that. That doesn't mean that's how we have to do it. We can send this here, we can make a phenomenal argument, and I'd be happy to stand there and explain what's in this. I'm not gonna walk away from this budget. I disagree philosophically with the number, but that doesn't mean I disagree with funding the town. And we could win that argument, and this gets passed, and you guys can all laugh at me, and that's fine. I'd be very happy if that happened. But it's a matter of how we want to go through this experience. But my point is keep remembering that if we pass this, which it sounds like we might, and that's fine, don't be surprised on the 17th if we're told to come back and do what we're not necessarily going to do right now. And maybe that's fine. We need more time, more guidance, whatever. We don't really know where their thinking is with the new mill rate or with the new grand list. That's fine.
One of the advantages of waiting may be that they do give us some guidance.
I agree.
So I don't think it would be a wasted exercise if we have to do that.
That's, again,
And we haven't done, I mean, they work hard to pull forth the guidance ahead of time, right? But the guidance is done without the narrative of what we're talking, that's why this is a reactive process. And so I think that's why it's valuable to have the conversation, even though we probably know the inevitable.
That's okay. Again,
Okay.
I'd be very happy to be wrong. I hope I am.
Okay, and I'm good with that, but as far as these items, like I still these CNR stuff, so none of this impacts this, right? And so we're just leaving this as it is?
Depends on which this you're
The
talking about.
capital, the capital sheets.
Depends on which source of funding it comes from.
Right, okay. So general fund comes out of the tax, or tax.
So.
And I don't want to belabor it, I know.
No, it's a good-
I
it's a
just
good
wanna-
question.
Because I know there's reserves also we pay for stuff with, and so I saw somewhere that the general fund, and there's general fund reserves, but it doesn't say which comes from which.
So there's some capital that's in the operating budgets, like the police cruisers, for example,
Right.
are actually in the police department budget. So that will impact that 7.22 up there.
Okay.
But if it's anything outside of the operating budget, you'll reduce the mill rate, but you won't impact the 7.22.
Okay.
Which I think was Eric's point
So like
early
the
on.
cruisers,
So, like
the,
funding source.
yeah, it's
The
G-
paving,
Cruisers,
and
the
the plow,
paving up in the plow truck.
the 100 public works truck, right?
Yep, so the $180,000 public works truck is reflected in operating. The 3 police cruisers at 141, and about 200,000.
200 even.
200 even, yeah, thank you. 200 even in paving funds are in the general fund operating budget. So those 3 particular capital items, if we were to reduce them or take them away, that would have an impact on the 7.22. Other.
We took them away, but they're
Right.
in here, so they're already counted in here, so they don't get ranked with this stuff.
They're built into operating.
Yeah, okay.
Right,
So
if
they're
we-
in 2 places, kind of.
Right, there's a transfer out of operating to capital to fund those items.
Yeah.
But again, if you were to, in theory, reduce them, eliminate them, it would impact the mill rate. It would bring down that percentage number from the 7%. Other capital items are reflected under debt service and capital, am I missing any, Amy?
Nope.
Before you go further, though, the police cars and the plow truck are all in there because we've gone back and forth with the Board of Finance.
And they
We do
put
them
them there.
every year.
They're, right, they're line
So
items,
that's
yeah.
why they were not in there previously. They've
Okay,
been
and I-
added.
Yeah.
So again,
Well, they were in there, they were in there as a
I'm not saying to take them
They
out,
just-
but
They were just
believe
not
me.
illuminated in the way that they are.
well, we could take them out
But-
against Board of, and again, I'm fine with this, and take other CNR out and put them back in their place, reducing the number of CNR items. Means cutting that list.
Cutting the list, but not those, cutting
And
the
then
other
Amy
general fund
does-
items.
Means cutting 10 things from that list and asking Amy to go redo with the funding sources to lower the mill rate and the operating budget is what it means.
Okay.
So if you wanted to cut 5 things on there, 10 things on there, we could do that, and that would have an impact potentially on the top and the bottom, depending on the funding source and how Amy paid for it.
And is that what the Board of Finance will do?
They will ask us to rank them, and then they will do that, yeah. They generally disagree with our funding source, and then they agree with it, and then they don't, and then
Okay.
it gets paid for.
I think there's a strong feeling on the Board of Finance that what was put in operating in the police budget, the public works budget, was done that for a reason. I don't think you'd have their support taking it out.
Yeah, no, I don't want to take it out. I didn't mean to take
was a
that out.
policy, that was an evolutionary
talking about the
change
other
that you
things.
guys have made over the last,
Yeah.
it's in line with all the other evolutionary changes for, I'll call it accounting, that you guys have made.
Yeah, I understand that part.
So Wendy, I think what you're getting at is the 614, we have an easier ability to impact.
614.
The debt service and capital line item, the 614, 181 increase, the 10.34%.
Yeah, so this would be part of the capital.
Oh, that's the debt service.
If you start cutting projects on there, cutting capital on there, that number starts going down.
Probably.
Operating transfers as well, that's where CNR is.
Okay.
And then Amy would redo it based on all the pots of money. So basically, if we had a goal, we don't think that 555 coming out of reserves, which is part of that 614, is a good idea. That's why we went through that cash exercise the other night. We could take all the projects out that are associated with that, and that would lower the 614 by 555.
Sean, what would that be? What are those, just give me a name.
It was the ones we talked about, as Amy's got the accounting of where they are.
Actually, Melissa does.
Melissa does.
What do we want? Can you pull up the capital plan?
So
But it's
My
not that
thought-
simple, because we still gotta rank them.
My thought is that if we have the conversation with the Board of Finance right up front, that we did not meet their guidance, but we could have specific questions for them, and they could give us guidance in terms of which of these levers they'd like us to use in order to get more in line. That'd be my recommendation.
I would be okay with that, but the way that we started tonight, Sean kind of indicated it's our job. So are we doing our job? I don't know. I'm asking.
Yeah, it's a fair question.
Well, the way I look at it is that our job is, like what Sean talked about, is to, I don't disagree with Sean's ranking. Sermon number one always starts with public safety, right? So not at all disagreeing with what our job is. I don't think that our job is to follow the guidance of the Board of Finance. I think that's not what our job is. Our job is to put forth a budget that meets the service expectations of the residents of the town of Simsbury. That's what our job is in this process. The Board of Finance's guidance is, it's literally what the interpretation of that word is. It's a guidance. That's all it is to me.
Thanks, Chris. Is anyone going to call the question?
Oh, just,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, just to loop back, there was one item I was hoping to get a little bit more clarification on regarding the electricity for the special revenue fund. And again, just to confirm whether or not there was a desire to maybe slightly reduce that account. And if so, to then, say if you reduce it by 10,000, do you then also want to reduce the increased contribution to the revenue fund by a corresponding 10,000? I think that was sort of maybe the last policy question that was left that I hadn't really heard strong consensus on one way or the other.
My feeling is that would be a reasonable thing to do.
So maybe start with like a 10,000 reduction, see how the full 12 months plays out, and then revisit it next year.
Well, we talked about doing 25, and Tom said, please don't reduce one of the programs, the 5,000. So
5,000.
would it be reasonable to say we reduce it by 20 instead of 10?
I'm here to work with it, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
We'll do it.
Okay, we'll make it work. If folks feel comfortable with that.
Okay?
Okay. So we would be reducing the electricity budget and the special revenue fund by 20. And then we would only, then from the general fund, instead of increasing the general fund contribution by 20, that would be flat, but we would still be doing the 5,000 reallocation to the special revenue fund for the community programs. Right, is that what I was hearing?
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
I know
makes
that
sense.
part is really important to community
That's good
programs.
clarification. We get all excited to cut stuff and we screw things
A
up.
lot of library books that you're not.
It does, it does.
Not just books, I'm sorry.
Materials.
Dude, don't get us going again.
Hey, my book's coming, my donated book's coming. All right. I shouldn't have spoken so loudly earlier about what our job is. That's what I think ours is. I
No,
am
it's
not
fair.
speaking whatsoever for the rest of the members of the Board of Selectmen.
You're not wrong. So we all have a perspective on it. We're all volunteers just trying to do the right thing. Nobody's got bad intentions up here. Everybody's trying to do the right thing.
And nor do the people in the Board of Finance.
No,
whatsoever.
everybody's coming at it.
Too many of
from-
them are my friends.
No, they're all good people. We're all trying to get this done and keep this town going and get out of the professionals' way so they can do their job. These guys all do a great job. We're very lucky.
Thank you.
So do you need anything else from us before we take a little break for the math to occur?
You guys need a little bit of time?
Yeah, we have to put your motions together too. so.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah, that'd be great if we take a brief break just to prepare the operating motions.
We got beer.
A beer?
Clarification. Right now, the assumption we're going with, as the motion's written, is to reduce the interest rate assumption from 6 3/4 to 6.5. And I just wanted to see if we're comfortable recommending that, or if I wanted to go somewhere in the middle, and I bring
Well,
that up 'cause
I
Wendy-
was comfortable with the 6.625 because it didn't increase the mill rate
Yeah.
as much.
Be mill right now.
It was more of a compromise, 62 versus 100 and something dollars. I understand the point that the Board of Finance is going to say, is going to cut it to 6.5 anyway. I looked at it as a good measure, because we were at 6.75 before, so at least we've come down from your proposal. That was my rationale. And the increase goes from 7.7, whatever the number was, to 6.69, so it's a 1% less, a little closer there than we are now. But I could be persuaded if that's how we feel we want to go, and let them, that we have no leverage on that, I guess is the point, right?
I mean, I agree with where you're coming from, and I could easily get behind that. I think at the end of the day, the Board of Finance is going to do what they, what they think is right.
Okay.
Which is why, right now, I feel like I could go with the 6.5 or go with the 6.625. But I just want to hear what others think.
The 6.5 is what the auditors have proposed to the Board of Finance. This is not arbitrary.
Yeah.
So as much as I don't want it, I'm not for increasing our mill rate. However, this is what the Board of Finance has tasked us with. That is their job, right? They're doing their job. So I would be in favor of leaving it at 6.5 and doing the mortality table as they asked us to.
Chris, that's where your
I
head is at?
second Jackie's, just because I think we're going there anyways. And like, kind of, my sermon the other night is that we've got experts who have come back and said, this is where you need to be. I'm not an expert in that, so I'm going to go along with what they say is the right thing to do. Not the right thing to do, what you should be doing.
Okay.
So yes, 6.5.
Okay. Hearing no other conversation, I'll introduce the first motion. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to approve the Board of Selectmen's 2020 to 2021 operating budget in the amount of $23,824,399 to include the following changes from the town manager's proposed budget: $860 increase for the town clerk credit card reader and ACH fees, $2,000 increase for the contribution to Interval House, $2,500 increase for the contribution to the Chamber of Commerce, $5,000 increase for the contribution to SCTV, $397 increase for the contribution to the Farmington River Watershed Association, $5,000 increase for the contribution to the Main Street Partnership, $474,584 increase in pension contribution to account for new mortality table and reducing the interest rate assumption from 6.75% to 6.5%, $25,000 increase for assessor inspection services, $96,232 increase for parks facility maintenance technician position, $4,260 increase for upgrading a sergeant to a lieutenant, $183,872 increase for deputy chief position, $20,000 increase for library materials, $20,000 decrease in contribution to the Parks and Rec Fund. So someone would say so moved?
Oh, I thought you,
Thank you.
yeah. So moved.
I'm thinking
Is there-
about it.
A second? I'll second it. I'm allowed to. Is there any further conversation? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Yeah, nay.
You gotta vote, Wendy.
I know. I was gonna go nay because of the pension, but that's my only stopping block, so
Go ahead, then say nay.
Okay.
nay.
Nay. Okay, so the motion fails 3-2. I think, let's have a conversation. No, Wendy, I know it would get you to a
It would,
yes.
and it's very quickly.
I would also support that because it is also not against what the experts are telling us. We would be getting part of the way there, we wouldn't be getting all the way there. Chris, where would that leave you?
if it moves, yes, that's, I would vote for that, because it moves, and I'll say why, is it moves forward all of the increases, which is what the discussion is around. It's not around 6.5, 6.25, 7.5, 50, whatever that number is, for me, so.
Okay. And I was gonna say, it gives you guys the credit where you want to the 6.75, which you made that recommendation and thought that was good. And it also compromises with the Board of Finance at 6.5. If they come back and say 6.5, then we go to the 6.5 because we have to. But I just think it was a good middle point, because I agree with everything else on the top half.
Do we need to take a moment and recalculate?
Yes.
I just want to be clear, though, again, they've already said they want you at 6.5. So this is not
But
a.
they wanted us at 2.52, right?
Okay,
for
but the straw poll last night definitively said 6.5. So this is an arbitrary point you're fighting.
Okay,
So you can fight it, but you're going to come back and do the 6.5 next
okay.
week.
Okay, let's do the new
Do
number.
6.625?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel that strongly about it.
That's fine. You certainly, you can.
Actually.
That was a tough one.
Wendy,
There's nothing wrong with that.
I
It's
agree.
a small thing, and I understand your point, but I just feel like,
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why we all
and they're
vote.
probably watching us right now and thinking, oh,
No, they went to bed probably.
I am gonna protest if I have to read this whole thing again, but I might have to.
Yep.
I thought we could just do this, so.
Don't,
All right, give me a Sour
Next
Patch.
time, if you're going to bribe us
Wait a
ahead, I
minute.
mean.
is this something that you were you
Thanks
you
for-
bought out of budgetary monies?
Out of my own
That has to be replaced somehow?
personal funds.
Don't come next year. Do you remember last year you took from my budget and I got now,
I already told Lisa next year we're bringing Sour Patch Kids to work, or she suggested work that day.
I have Mike and Ike's in
We
my
made mental
car.
notes.
Oh, Mike and Ike's are deadly.
Those are my favorites.
that's what I said. I said you have Mike and Ike's
Those are my
or
favorites. One other reason too, I
Sour
was
Patch
gonna
Kids.
say, is because
Myself.
I didn't like the increase in the amount of the tax based on the 6.5. Let the Board of Finance tell us that.
My opinion is exactly where yours is. I think I want to show that that we're making progress toward the 6.5.
Yeah.
We don't have to get there.
Okay, well, thanks for.
I'd be-
Good.
The reason why I voted for it is because I know that
That's
Take
fine,
us there
that's
anyway.
fine, let them.
All
I
right.
feel
No,
I
deal.
did my due diligence.
Oh.
Oh, it's scary. Everybody has to stay.
Fine, Wendy,
I
go
know,
ahead.
I'm happy to. Catch up on my news, the pandemic. I do like just looking at it like this, because it really shows you,
Yeah.
like, it'd be helpful to
It
have something
actually
like
is
this to
nice.
start with, you know? So you could see everything in one page.
Personnel, 7:30 tomorrow.
Do.
We do.
I'll schedule that.
Really? It's on your calendar? Yeah.
I didn't read my,
I
you
just looked at it.
have to read your packet too.
It's a pretty straightforward meeting.
Okay, good.
You have to call in for it. Yet allowed to work from home entirely.
Oh.
Sucks tomorrow.
What time do you have until?
9.
Okay, that's more than 5. All right. Oof. I have.
That's a good day.
I have not put my work calendar on my phone.
No, this is just my work phone.
Ah, got
I'm
it.
not allowed to mix the two. That's my
Oh my
that's my
gosh.
non-work phone.
Yeah. Wow.
So, this is my life one. Although the problem is Maria's invites, I can't add to my shared calendar with my wife. So when I get your calendar invites, I can't share them to my home calendar. So I have to make another one because otherwise, like tonight, my wife's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Budget."
I do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So that would make sense. I should probably do that.
Do you have two different emails?
No, I tried
For your
it. It
calendars?
says it won't let me. I've gotten into the calendar and tried different things. It won't let me share it.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Because I thought some of those calendar invites were based on what email was for the calendar. I have personal, town, and work as far as different emails.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you know, I've got two emails on here that come into it,
Right.
and I can choose, when I have a calendar invite, I can choose which calendar I want it to be on, and, you know.
It's also St. Patrick's Day.
It is.
It is.
There's no celebrating for you.
Go drinking anyway. So.
Is that a special, that must be a special
For the
Board of
day?
Finance meeting?
No, in general.
All, forever?
Yeah, I've been drinking nine and a half months. Can't you tell I'm more pleasant now?
No,
I think you're far more ornery.
totally agree.
No, that's
Could I
actually,
have gotten more?
I don't know,
ornery?
I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that,
I was born without the important filter that you all have.
I think that's a
how
very
many
true
filters I have.
statement.
okay, so how much we have here. I haven't had a blue one yet. I'm trying to fish that blue one out.
I had a blue one.
Oh, my goodness. I hope that printout comes soon.
See, get everyone the blue one. So I've got a blue one out. No, see, I can't mix. I can have one each. Yeah, one each. You can't have two. I can't cross. See, I have a blue and a red and an orange and a yellow. As long as I go one at each of those at a time, I'm square. You won't see me go out that window.
You're square? Really?
That's what I was gonna say, but I didn't.
No. Don't start there.
Well, there is counseling available at social services.
There's a cute puppy video. It's like, cutest thing.
And I gotta bring my dog in for the top dog thing.
I'm
Oh.
gonna bring mine in, except you attack other dogs. So.
No. Photo.
Why, is your dog a top dog?
No, I'm gonna bring it in. I'm gonna bring him to work, man.
bring in the
Freaking
photo.
a lot. My office loves it.
Brody was. My first Frenchie. He was top dog.
Really?
8 years ago. Yeah.
Thank you.
I did you did graft the clerk's office.
No, it was before I was elected. He kicked off my political campaign. He won in July.
Oh,
got
it.
See, we could have just
Now
written
you
it
treat
in
your daughter for
on this one.
He wore a sweater. He wore a sweater.
See, I would have.
No, the number changed.
No, I know. I noticed. I noticed it, but I'm just saying, like, after all that. Thank you.
So the
Over 6.5 and right in
Yeah.
625. This number is accurate. We just found a little typo, and we'll make sure it's correct.
Okay. All right. Welcome back. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to approve the Board of Selectmen's 2020 to 2021 operating budget in the amount of $23,705,961, to include the following changes from the town manager's proposed budget: $860 increase for the town clerk credit card reader and ACH fees, $2,000 increase for the contribution to Interval House, $2,500 increase to the contribution to the Chamber of Commerce, $5,000 increase for the contribution to SCTV, $397 increase for the contribution to the Farmington River Watershed Association, $5,000 increase for the contribution to Main Street Partnership, $356,146 increase in pension contribution to account for new mortality table and reducing the interest rate assumption from 6 3/4% to 6.625%, $25,000 increase for assessor inspection services, $96,000 $232 increase for the Parks Facility Maintenance Technician position, $4,260 increase for upgrading a sergeant to a lieutenant, $183,000 $872 increase for the deputy chief position, $20,000 increase for library materials, and a $20,000 decrease in the contribution to the Parks and Rec Fund.
So moved?
Second.
Any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, the motion passes 3-2. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to approve the Water Pollution Control 2020 to 2021 operating budget in the amount of $4,223,421, including Avon and Granby CWF share?
So moved.
Second.
Any conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to approve the residential property 2020 to 2021 operating budget in the amount of $45,872?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to approve the debt service 2020 to 2021 operating budget in the amount of $5,400,000? Did I miss one?
Yeah, we
Oh,
missed the parks.
I crossed that off too quickly. I'm sorry. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to approve the Simsbury Parks and Rec Fund 2020 to 2021 operating budget in the amount of $2,137,781?
And I'll move that with the confirmation that the 20 was taken out of it. Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to approve the debt service 2020 to 2021 operating budget in the amount of $5,471,465?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to approve the capital and non-recurring plan for 2020 to 2021 in the amount of $1,617,200, including $416,250 to be funded by the general fund via the 5-year payback method, $675,450 to be funded by the general fund, $60,900 to be funded by federal or state grants, $71,000 to be funded by Town Aid Road Fund, $150,000 to be funded by the Sewer Use Fund, $165,000 to be funded by the Police Private Duty Fund, $21,000 to be funded by the Eno Trust Fund, $12,600 from the Dial-A-Ride Fund, $45,000 from the Golf Equipment Fund.
So moved.
Second.
Any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to add the following new projects to the capital improvement plan for 2020 to 2021 in accordance with Charter Section 803B? Open space acquisition, $2.2 million. Transfer to capital reserve, $50,000. Plow truck, $258,000. Secondary clarifier weir covers. Tom Roy's not here. $275,000.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to approve the capital improvement program to include the following projects in 2020 to 2021 with total funding of $6,355,000 for 2020 to 2021? The radio system upgrade/replacement, $1,202,000 funded by bonds. The open space acquisition, $2,200,000 bonds. Transfer to capital reserve, $50,000 cash. Greenway improvements, $135,000 cash. The highway pavement management, $1,205,000 bonds, cash, and grants. The plow truck, $258,000 grants. Public Works facility paving and storm drainage, $330,000 cash. Sidewalk reconstruction, $200,000 cash. Secondary clarifier weir covers, $275,000. Sewer use fund. District network infrastructure, $500,000 cash.
So moved.
Second.
Any further conversation?
Does that 6355 include the project underneath? It does not.
No.
Okay.
6, okay, actually, thank you. That was a question I had. Any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020 to approve the following project in 2020 to 2021? The Simsbury High School Stadium bleachers press box replacement at $850,000, funded by bonds.
So moved.
Second.
Any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay,
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
sorry.
So, you got ahead of us.
It doesn't count. It's out of
apologize.
order.
So the motion
Doesn't pass.
doesn't pass. It fails 3-2. Is there a motion effective March 11th, 2020, to refer the following capital projects to the Planning Commission in accordance with Connecticut General Statute, Section 8-24? The radio system upgrade replacement, open space acquisition, transfer to capital reserve, greenway improvements, highway pavement management, plow truck, public works facility paving and storm drainage, sidewalk reconstruction, secondary clarifier weir covers, district network infrastructure, and and we don't have to read that one.
So moved.
Second.
Any conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. I'm missing my agenda, but I think, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have to, yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Tom.
guys.